She looked right at me, my wife of 9 years, and laughed while her lover poured her champagne, both of them knowing I was supposed to be dead by morning. That was the moment everything split. The moment I stopped pretending we had a marriage, a family, a future. Betrayal isn't a scream or a slap. It's a whisper, a smirk. It's the sound of your daughter's laugh echoing through a party thrown in your honor, while the people you love plan your funeral over caviar and wine. My father called me just as the string quartet hit the first note of Clair de Lune. His voice was sharp, urgent. "Ethan, get Lila. Get out. Now." I didn't ask why. I didn't look back. I just picked up my daughter, smiled for the cameras, and disappeared into the night. That was the moment I stopped being a husband. That was the moment I became a target. And it was also the moment I realized I wasn't the one who was going to die. They were. Before we dive into today's story, take a moment to share where you're watching from. We love seeing how our stories bring people together from every corner of the world. Your thoughts and comments are what make this community so special, and we're truly grateful to have you here. If you haven't already, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story filled with drama, resilience, and unexpected twists. Now, settle in, get comfortable, and maybe grab your favorite drink, because this is a tale you won't want to miss. Let's get started. The music was too loud, the smiles too bright, and the champagne far too cold for a party honoring a woman who'd stopped loving me years ago. I knew it, had known it for months, maybe years, but denial is a powerful thing, especially when it's dressed in a $4,000 designer gown and blowing kisses to your daughter under crystal chandeliers. I stood at the edge of the Marquand family estate's garden terrace, watching the party unfold like an opera I didn't want a ticket to. The Beverly Hills evening air was heavy with perfume and money, and my lungs burned with something I couldn't quite name yet. Lila's laugh cut through the noise, that sweet, unfiltered laugh only a 6-year-old can make. She darted between her cousins, her pink dress trailing behind her like the cape of a heroine in her own little world. I smiled despite myself. She was the only real thing left in this illusion I'd built with Celine. Then my phone buzzed. Dad lit up on the screen. My father never called during social events, especially not during one thrown by the Marquands. He hated these people almost as much as he hated faking small talk. I stepped away from the laughter, past the hedge-lined patio and into the dim corridor leading to the side courtyard. I pressed accept. "Ethan." My father's voice was low, brittle. "Get Lila and leave." Now don't ask why. Just go." The air seemed to collapse around me. My fingers tightened on the phone. "Dad, what?" "Ethan." His voice cut like a blade. "This isn't a drill. Do exactly as I say. I'll explain everything when you're safe." My instincts, those hardwired reflexes from my military years, the ones I'd dulled for the sake of domestic peace, lit up in red. No hesitation, no confusion, only movement. I turned and walked, deliberately, not too fast, back toward the crowd. The garden was still buzzing with laughter and curated elegance. Celine was standing near the champagne tower, radiant under the glow of rented chandeliers. She was laughing, with a man in a dove-gray suit I didn't recognize. His hand lingered too long on her waist. His fingers trailed down the small of her back as she leaned in, whispering something behind her flute of Dom Perignon. My stomach twisted. I filed his face away, but I didn't stop. I crossed to the kids' play area, crouched by Lila, and smiled as if everything was fine. "Hey, kiddo," I said softly. "How about we go on a secret mission? Just you and me." She beamed. "Like spies?" "Exactly like spies." Celine noticed us from across the lawn. Her smile flickered. She started moving toward us. "Stay calm," I told myself. "Don't give them a scene." I scooped Lila up and adjusted my tie as I walked swiftly toward the valet station at the front gate. Celine's voice called behind me, sharp, confused, irritated. "Ethan, where are you going?" I didn't answer. I forced a tight smile at the valet, handed over the claim ticket, and buckled Lila into her booster seat like it was any other night. She asked me if we were going to get ice cream. "Not tonight, sweetie," I said as calmly as I could. "We've got somewhere important to be." I pulled out of the circular driveway just as Celine appeared in my rearview mirror. She stood frozen at the gate in her golden gown, clutching her phone like a grenade that hadn't gone off yet. 15 minutes later, I was in the parking lot of a nondescript coffee shop off Sunset, Lila distracted with a coloring book and a snack bar from my glove compartment. I called my father back. "I'm parked. Secure location. Now talk." "You're not going to like this," he said, voice grave. "But it's better you hear it from me than the coroner. They were planning to kill you tonight." Silence. "What?" "Celine and that guy she's been seeing. Matthias Quinn. You know him." And I did. I remembered the subtle cologne, the expensive watch, the smirk he wore like armor at gallery openings. He was a trust fund kid turned LA, influencer. He'd been circling Celine for months under the guise of art consulting and philanthropic ventures. "They've been working with someone from your past, someone from Camp Sentinel. You remember Luca Vargo?" My jaw tightened. My pulse spiked. And of course I remembered. Vargo had been my CO before I blew the whistle on his black market weapons funneling. He lost his commission. I'd assumed he disappeared. Apparently not. "They've been planning this for months," my dad continued. "Staging it to look like an accident. Carbon monoxide poisoning in the guest house, maybe a tampered gas line. Something clean. Insurance pays out. Celine gets full custody. Quinn steps in. You're out of the picture. Forever." I stared out the windshield, the lights of Sunset Boulevard bleeding into the glass like oil. A sharp, cold clarity settled into my chest. They weren't just trying to ruin me. They were erasing me. "I have files," my father said. "Surveillance, financials, even audio. I'll send you the drop point for the drive. You need to lay low. Stay dark. Don't go home. Not yet." Lila reached over and touched my sleeve. "Daddy, are we still playing spies?" I swallowed the acid in my throat. "We are," I said, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. "But this time, it's real." That night, I checked us into a furnished corporate rental under one of my shell LLCs. Secure building, no cameras in the hallways, underground parking. I watched Lila fall asleep on the king-sized bed after I read her 2 chapters of her favorite book. Her little hand was curled around mine, like she could sense how close we'd come to losing everything. I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling until the sun came up. By morning, I was no longer the man I had been at that party. I wasn't Christopher, the dutiful husband, the provider, the polished gentleman who made Celine look like the perfect wife in society magazines. I was Christopher, the man they underestimated, and I was going to take back everything. Ethan stood at the threshold of betrayal, the truth clawing at his chest like broken glass. Everything he thought he knew about Celine, the mother of his child, the woman he'd once trusted with his life, was unraveling faster than he could contain it. Her lies weren't just infidelities. They were strategy, calculated, cruel, deliberate. Each memory of her touch now felt surgical. Every whispered "I love you," a tool. He sat alone at the long walnut table in the safe house, eyes red from a night without sleep. The glow of dawn filtered through closed blinds. The room smelled like coffee and silence. Frank's voice had haunted him through the night. "They were planning to kill you." It played on a loop, warped by rage and disbelief. Celine wasn't just cheating, she was eliminating him. Lila stirred on the couch, curled beneath a soft throw blanket, her little fingers wrapped around her stuffed wolf. She looked peaceful, like the world hadn't shifted beneath her while she slept. Ethan's heart cracked. She didn't deserve this. None of it. The burner phone buzzed. A text from his father. Drop point is clear. Drive alone. 0600. Ethan was out the door in less than 5 minutes. The location was a vacant lot behind a closed auto body shop off Lincoln Boulevard. Neutral, dead, forgettable. A weatherproof package sat beneath the third dumpster, wedged between an old tire and broken crates. Ethan scanned for tails, then retrieved it. Inside, a solid-state drive, 3 surveillance photos, a burner flash drive, and a folded note in his father's sharp handwriting. She's been seeing Quinn for 14 months. I have phone taps, bank logs, and private surveillance. Vargo's name popped up in encrypted emails. They're using offshore accounts. Celine paid a man named Josias for falsified gas line service requests 2 weeks ago. You were the target. I'll find the rest. Stay dark. Protect Lila. Dad. Ethan gripped the papers until his knuckles went white. Celine hadn't just betrayed him emotionally. She'd signed his death warrant. Back at the safe house, Lila was still asleep. Ethan plugged the flash drive into his secure laptop and watched the surveillance footage in grim silence. There she was. Celine. Sliding into the back seat of a black SUV outside her private yoga studio. Quinn was already inside. They kissed. Not like people in love, like people who had won. Her smile was reptilian. She laughed as she handed him a file folder. Frame by frame, Ethan watched the kind of intimacy that had once belonged to him, now weaponized against him. Every kiss, every touch, every glance told him this wasn't lust, it was alliance. He opened the bank logs next. Celine had transferred over $850,000 into a shell LLC tied to Quinn. Incrementally, laundering it through charity galas and fake art consulting services, Ethan had seen every transaction pass through the joint account and hadn't questioned a single one. Then came the audio files. Ethan listened to her voice, saying words that made his skin crawl. It'll look like a leak. The gas line paperwork is already filed. All we need is one overnight trip. He goes to bed, doesn't wake up. It's clean. It's grief-worthy. It's perfect. Quinn chuckled. And Lila? A pause. Then Celine again. We spin it. I'm the grieving widow, the mother left behind. Sympathy buys silence. My family will make sure custody isn't even a question. We bury him with a eulogy and a golden casket. Ethan couldn't breathe. He slammed the laptop shut, heart pounding. Lila stirred on the couch. Daddy? He crossed to her, kneeling beside the couch and brushing her hair back. Hi, honey. Did you sleep okay? She nodded, still blinking. You hungry? She smiled. Waffles. He smiled back, but it felt like someone else's face. Coming right up. Frank met him 2 hours later at a closed diner near Topanga Canyon. The parking lot was empty except for Frank's old black Grand Cherokee. You good? Frank asked, the second Ethan slid into the booth. No, Ethan said, but I'm here. Frank slid over a manila folder. Matthias Quinn, 34. No priors, but enough red flags to build a bonfire. Son of Warren Quinn, the investment banker who nearly brought down Eastland Holdings. Matthias has a history of grifting rich women, then consulting for them. Celine wasn't his first mark. Ethan flipped through the folder. Travel records, property deeds, photos. I've got audio of him meeting with Luca Vargo, Frank continued. They're planning a separate operation, laundering through tech shell companies. Celine helped him route funds. Intentionally or not, she's knee-deep. What about Lila? Frank paused. Ethan, there's something else. Ethan looked up. The tone in Frank's voice turned his stomach. We did a quiet DNA verification based on the medical files you submitted when Lila was born. It doesn't match your genetic markers. The air turned thin. What are you saying? She's not biologically yours. Silence. I'm sorry, son. Ethan stared at the tabletop, the wood grain blurring into meaningless lines. But he didn't break. Doesn't change anything, he said, voice hard. She's mine. Frank nodded. That's what I figured you'd say. Back at the safe house, Ethan watched Lila draw butterflies with a purple marker. The innocence in her eyes didn't change because of a DNA strand. She was still the little girl who called him Daddy Bear, the child who made up bedtime stories about heroes with wolf sidekicks, the one thing in his life that was pure. If Celine thought a paternity test would break his bond with Lila, she underestimated him again. He called Frank that night. I'm done waiting. You're going after them? I'm going to dismantle them. One piece at a time. There was a pause. I'll send you what you need. 3 nights later, Ethan stood inside a luxury penthouse in West Hollywood, across from a woman named Geneva Price, an old contact from his covert logistics days. She now ran a discreet intelligence-for-hire group that provided digital forensics, surveillance tools, and offshore cleanup. You're really doing this? She asked, pouring them both a glass of bourbon. Ethan nodded. All right, she said. Then let's make sure no one sees it coming. They spent hours building the framework, a financial chokehold to trigger audit flags, a media campaign seeded through anonymous whistleblower leaks, and a fake counter-conspiracy to trap Quinn into revealing more than he realized. As Geneva loaded a thumb drive into a secure courier case, she asked, And what about Celine? Ethan looked out the window, the skyline of Los Angeles flickering beneath them. I want her to feel safe, he said coldly. I want her to believe she won. And then, I want her to watch it all burn. The next morning, Ethan began playing the part of the wounded husband. He texted Celine from a clean number. I'm alive. I know about Quinn. I'm not coming for revenge. I'm coming for peace, for Lila. If you want to talk, meet me. The hook was baited. She took it. She replied, Where? And just like that, the first piece moved on the board. Ethan smiled darkly. The game had begun. The day Celine agreed to meet, the sky over Los Angeles was gray, not stormy, but smothered. Ethan took it as a sign. The city, like him, was holding its breath. They met at a discreet private lounge in Bel Air that catered to the kind of people who wore secrets like accessories. Ethan arrived early, alone, wearing the same navy suit Celine once bought him for their anniversary. It was a calculated choice. He wanted to look familiar, non-threatening, sad even. Celine walked in 20 minutes late. She was dressed in muted tones, gray silk blouse, beige heels, dark sunglasses. She looked thinner, but polished. She greeted him like a stranger. Hi, Ethan. He stood but didn't offer a hug. Celine. They sat. Silence stretched between them until Celine offered a tired smile. I didn't expect to hear from you again. You expected to hear about me, though, Ethan said quietly. She flinched, but recovered. I'm not here to fight. Neither am I. He took out a small envelope from his jacket, slid it across the table. What's this? Proof that I know everything. Celine's fingers trembled as she opened it. Inside were stills from the surveillance footage, her in Quinn's arms, handing him files. One image showed a blurry, damning moment inside the yoga studio. She stared at it for a long time. Ethan kept his voice low, even. You tried to kill me. I know about the gas line. I know about Vargo. I know Quinn's not just your lover. He's your business partner, your co-conspirator, and your cover. Her eyes lifted, cold and sharp now. You don't understand what I was trying to do." "I understand perfectly," he said. "You wanted me gone, not divorced, not disgraced, dead." A moment passed where she could have denied it, but she didn't. Instead, she said, "You don't know what it's like, being married to someone who sees everything like a mission, like a protocol. I was dying in that house, Ethan, dying in your shadow." He shook his head. "So you chose to destroy everything, Lila's life, my father's trust, your own soul." Celine leaned in. "You left me long before this ever started." That was her last card, the emotional one, the victim, the wounded wife. Ethan stood. "Don't mistake this meeting for mercy," he said. "This is the last time I speak to you without consequences." Celine's lips parted to respond, but he walked out before she could form the words. 2 nights later, Ethan began surveillance on Quinn. Victor Andrade, a former field operative turned freelance digital analyst, had agreed to help. They met in a secure unit above a closed art gallery in Culver City. Quinn's routine was surprisingly sloppy. Gym at Equinox, brunch meetings in West Hollywood, late-night drives to the same 4 addresses, all tied to front companies under shell names. But what caught Ethan's attention was a hidden property in Laurel Canyon, gated, unlisted, and patrolled. "He's storing something there," Victor said. "Digital servers, hard backups, maybe foreign assets." Ethan nodded. "We need to confirm." They drove out that same night in Victor's low-profile sedan, parked a block down. Drones weren't an option. It had jammers, so they waited. At 2:17 a.m., Quinn arrived. Not alone. Celine was with him. She stepped out first, opened the trunk, pulled out a locked briefcase. Victor zoomed in. "Got it." The camera snapped fast. Silent shots. Selena entered the property with Quinn. Ethan sat still, ice in his veins. He turned to Victor. "Time to get inside." Victor looked unsure. "Now?" "I'm not waiting." The next morning, Celine called him. "You were right," she said. "I don't know how to fix this, but I want to try." Ethan played his role perfectly. "I still love you," he said flatly. "But I need honesty." A pause. "I'll tell you everything." She invited him to the gallery gala that weekend. Public, well covered by media, a safe venue, symbolic. Ethan agreed. He called Frank. "She's folding." "Or baiting," Frank warned. "I'm betting on both." The gala was extravagant. Art, champagne, press. Quinn was there, of course, smiling, perfectly curated, hands in his pockets like a man who had nothing to fear. Celine stood beside him like a queen in exile, subdued but radiant. Ethan entered alone, eyes scanning. Lila was with Frank, out of reach, safe. Celine broke away from Quinn and crossed to him. "You came." "I always do," Ethan said. They posed for photos. To the world, they looked like a couple mending things. But in Ethan's ear, a small calm whispered Victor's voice. "He's storing ledgers. 3 vaults. I have partial encryption." Ethan whispered back. "Good. Prep exposure protocol." Celine touched his arm. "Come with me." She led him to the rooftop lounge, alone. Soft jazz played in the background. "I know what you saw," she said, "but it's not what you think." Ethan laughed softly. "Celine, stop." She looked at him. Truly looked. "Do you hate me?" "No," he said. "I understand you. But you don't forgive me." "No." A silence settled. "I loved you," she said. "You loved the image of me," he corrected. "But when it got too real, too good, you ran, You couldn't destroy me in court, so you tried another way. Celine's eyes glistened. I didn't want to lose Lila. You already have, he said quietly. Later that night, Ethan stood in front of a mirror, removing his tie, his mind racing. Celine was cracking. Quinn was confident, but reckless. They were close. Victor texted him. Intercepted a signal. Quinn's been tipped off. He suspects something. Ethan called Frank. Time to accelerate. Agreed, Frank replied. We initiate part 2, but be careful. Quinn's dangerous. I'm counting on it, Ethan said. The following morning, Celine sent Ethan a message. Let's talk. Just us. I want to fix this. He replied, Where? She chose the same Bel Air lounge, but this time, Ethan wore a wire. Celine looked tired. The mask was slipping. I've made mistakes, she said. Ethan said nothing. I didn't know how to stop. Quinn, he pulled me in. He said you were dangerous, that you'd take Lila, that you'd make me disappear. And you believed him? She looked away. I wanted to. Ethan leaned forward. This is your one shot, Celine. If you want to salvage anything, tell me the truth. All of it. She broke. Told him about the money, the accounts, the offshore routes, Vargo's involvement, even Quinn's paranoia. I don't want to lose everything, she whispered. You already did, Ethan said. He left her there, shaking. Victor met him in the car. We've got everything, Victor said. Confession, bank links, digital keys. Good, Ethan said. Then let's begin the purge. The next 48 hours were surgical. Victor's team leaked anonymous financial documents to 3 investigative journalists. One reporter broke the story on a midnight live feed. Quinn's name trended within hours, tied to embezzlement, foreign interference, and tax evasion. The IRS launched a preliminary audit. 2 of his shell companies collapsed overnight. Celine's name hadn't surfaced, yet. But Quinn panicked. Victor intercepted a message. Burn it all. Liquidate. Ethan smiled. The trap had sprung. They always say the calm before the storm is when the real monsters make their move. But I knew better. The storm was already here. It had just learned to wear a tuxedo. By the end of the week, Matthias Quinn was bleeding. Not physically, financially, reputationally. The exposure Victor and I coordinated had gone off like a silent grenade. Overnight, his name was dragged into tax fraud allegations, shell corporation collapses, and frozen accounts from at least 2 countries. But he hadn't run. Not yet. Because he thought he still had a card to play. Celine. The thing about Quinn was that he underestimated me. He still saw the same clean-cut husband from magazines, the one in tailored suits who smiled at galas and handed out scholarships with Celine on his arm. That guy was long gone. What was left now was someone they couldn't predict. Someone who already accepted the destruction of his old life. That kind of man was dangerous. And I intended to make sure Quinn understood that, personally, but I had to play it right. The next move wasn't about brute force, it was about theater. I made the call to Celine 2 days after Quinn's media fallout. You need to convince him to meet, I told her. In person. No intermediaries. No security. Just us. Why would he ever agree to that? Because he's losing. Because you'll tell him it's the only way to negotiate before the fire spreads further. You'll say you have leverage to offer, something that will make him think he can flip this. She hesitated. And what do you want out of this? To watch him try. The meeting was staged in the most neutral, elegant trap I could engineer, a luxury penthouse I rented under an alias in Century City. It was sleek, cold, and dressed in minimalism, a place that reeked of money and detachment. The kind of space a man like Quinn would think meant power. I arrived early with Frank and Victor. We checked every angle, rewired the internal surveillance feeds, and swept for bugs. Frank waited in a black van across the street, listening to every word through the mics we had planted. Victor ran digital countermeasures from a nearby condo. I was alone in the room when Quinn arrived. He entered in his usual polished arrogance, dark suit, smooth loafers, cologne that reeked of European pretension. He carried a sleek leather briefcase and a smirk. "Ethan," he said, like we were two businessmen meeting to review quarterly projections. "Glad to see you're still breathing." I motioned for him to sit. "No lawyers, no PR," he commented as he looked around. "Very old school." "This isn't a legal conversation," I said. "This is personal." He raised an eyebrow. "Is it?" "Let's skip the theater," I said. "You know I have the files, the logs, the recordings. You know your empire is unraveling." "Careful," he said calmly. "You sound like a man looking for revenge." "That usually doesn't end well." "Not revenge," I corrected. "Clarity." He leaned back. "Celine told me you were clever, but I think she undersold it." "I think she oversold you," I said. That got his attention. His jaw ticked. "I should have put it together sooner," I continued. "Your sudden interest in Celine, the vague consulting work, the private trips. You weren't just seducing her, you were harvesting, using her name, her access, her pedigree." "She wanted out," he said flatly. "She wanted money," I snapped. "You gave her the illusion of both." We stared at each other. The air between us was colder than the AC. Then I stood and placed a single document on the table, a notarized transcript of Celine's confession, signed, sealed, and already backed up in 3 offshore drives. "This is a copy," I said. "The originals are distributed. If anything happens to me, your whole life goes on a drive to the FBI." His eyes scanned the page. He didn't flinch. But the twitch in his left cheek told me everything. "You're bluffing." I didn't respond. "I could walk out of here and erase you." I leaned in, slow and deliberate. "You tried, and you failed." We sat in silence again. Finally, he asked, "What do you want?" "I want you to lose everything, slowly. I want you to feel the weight of everything you tried to take from me. I want your face to be the one on every financial watch list, on every leaked file, every investor blacklist. I want you ruined, not killed, forgotten." He laughed, a short, hollow bark. "You know, she used to cry after your dinner parties, said she felt invisible." "Then I should have left sooner," I said coldly. He stood. "We're not done." "We are." He left without another word. 10 minutes later, Frank called. "He's panicking," he said. "He just made 2 international calls, one of them to Zurich. He's pulling everything he can. He's on the run." "Good," I said. "Let's make it public." We spent the next 24 hours flipping the final switches. Victor triggered Phase 3, timed media releases in 3 continents, tying Quinn to an international real estate laundering network. Frank looped in 2 contacts at the Department of Justice who had been quietly monitoring Quinn's father for years. Suddenly, Matthias Quinn became the epicenter of a multi-generational white-collar criminal investigation. He didn't show up to his own press conference the next day. And Celine? She called me. "I saw the news," she said. "They froze my accounts." "You shouldn't have merged yours with his," I replied. "I had no choice." "There's always a choice." She paused, then added, "He's threatening me. Says he'll burn everything if I don't fix it." "Then let him burn." "But what about Lila?" I paused. "She's with me," I said, "and she's safe, as long as you stay away from her." Her voice cracked. She's still my daughter. Legally, maybe. Morally, that's a different story. Silence. You never really loved me, did you? She asked. I sighed. I did, once. But you turned love into a transaction. She didn't reply. I hung up. A week passed. Quinn disappeared from public view. Celine was named as a cooperating witness in an ongoing investigation, but had no access to funds, status, or protection. Her legal team abandoned her once they realized she was more liability than client. Meanwhile, I returned to my real life, if you could call it that. Lila came home for good. She didn't ask about her mother. Not at first. Kids know when something's broken. I told her Celine had gone away for a while to figure things out. Lila nodded solemnly and asked if we could still have pancakes on Sundays. We did, every Sunday, but the storm wasn't done. One morning, Victor called me. We intercepted something. Quinn is planning an extraction. He's trying to flee to Dubai using a forged identity. When? 2 days. Do we stop him? Victor hesitated. Or we let him run and disappear into disgrace. I thought about it for a moment. No, that's not enough. What then? I want him delivered. The plan came together faster than we expected. Frank contacted a private firm in Vienna that specialized in corporate apprehensions. They tracked Quinn's safe house, monitored his calls, and triangulated his exit route. The night before his scheduled flight, they intercepted him. Quiet, legal, precise. Quinn didn't go to Dubai. He went to a holding cell in a federal facility, and that's where he belonged. Celine's downfall wasn't as loud. She moved out of Beverly Hills in silence, stripped of access, reputation, and protection. She tried to lean on old friends, but scandal has a way of clearing a room. She filed for supervised visitation. The court denied her motion after Frank submitted sealed footage and financial records. The judge ruled in favor of sole custody, permanently. Celine was allowed 1 video call a month. She cried on the first one. Lila didn't. 1 year later, everything had changed, but not the way most people expected. I didn't remarry. I didn't move to some remote cabin. I rebuilt with clarity. Blackwall Guardian, my risk mitigation firm, had tripled in value since the case. Investors saw me as a symbol of resilience and intelligence. They weren't wrong, but the real win wasn't public. It was private. Lila. Sunday pancakes. Homework nights. Quiet walks. Laughing again. Peace. And Celine. She sent one last letter. Handwritten. No return address. Inside, 2 words. I'm sorry. No excuses, no drama. Just 2 words. I burned it without opening the envelope again. I'd already written my ending. The night before the final takedown, I couldn't sleep. The house was still, filled only with the soft hum of the fridge and Lila's steady breathing down the hall. I sat on the floor in my home office, back against the wall, surrounded by open files, burner phones, and the quiet weight of everything that had happened. Quinn was locked up now, stripped of his illusion of power. Celine was in legal ruin, her social circle dissolving like sugar in water. Their empire, built on deceit, manipulation, and bloodless betrayal, was gone. But this wasn't over. Not yet. Because the real battle wasn't just in courtrooms or back channels. It was in how I reclaimed control. Fully, irrevocably. Frank had called earlier that day. We traced one final ledger, he'd said. There's still movement. Someone's covering up. Quinn? I asked. No. He's done. It's Celine. Of course. She had one card left, and I knew exactly how she'd play it. Frank met me at a small airstrip outside Palm Springs. The sun hadn't risen yet. The desert sky was bruised violet, the cold biting through my jacket. "She's flying out tonight," Frank said, handing me a dossier. "Private jet. Destination filed as St. Lucia. We have 3 hours." I flipped through the file. Offshore bank logs, recently activated LLCs, and a new passport application under the name Sabrina Voigt. "She's going to disappear," Frank said. "Start over." I didn't blink. Not this time. We drove in silence toward the hangar. In the back seat sat the man who would make the next part possible. Andres, a former corporate recon specialist who now dealt in corporate removal logistics. He wasn't a mercenary. He didn't use guns. He used leverage. Digital, psychological, strategic. "She still thinks she's holding the knife," Andres said. "You're about to show her the blade was plastic." I arranged the meeting for noon. The same penthouse where I confronted Quinn. Cold, clean, sterile. The place of unraveling. Celine arrived late, dressed in designer black, eyes hidden behind dark lenses. She moved with the self-importance of someone who still believed she was untouchable. "I only came because you insisted," she said, stepping inside. I closed the door behind her. "You're leaving tonight." She said nothing. "I know about St. Lucia. I know about Sabrina." Her expression didn't flinch, but her fingers clenched around her purse. "Whatever you think you're going to find on the other side of that flight, peace, safety, a clean start, you won't," I said. "Because this follows you." She set her purse down, slowly removed her sunglasses. "So what do you want, Ethan?" she asked. "One last punishment?" "No," I said. "The truth." She laughed. Quiet, sharp. "You already know the truth." "I want to hear it from you." She looked me in the eye. "Fine. You were the perfect man on paper. That's what made it so unbearable. You made me feel like a failure every time I walked into a room. Everything with you was organized, structured, controlled. You made success look effortless while I was drowning in performance." "You cheated," I said. "You lied. You conspired to kill me." She exhaled sharply. "I didn't want you dead. I wanted freedom." "You wanted money," I corrected. "That too," she admitted. "But mostly, I wanted to matter again." I walked to the table and opened the laptop, brought up a series of files, images, videos, emails. Then I slid over the final page, a draft press release. She scanned it. Her hands trembled. "You wouldn't," she whispered. "I would," I said. "And if you board that plane tonight, this goes out. Your name, your face, your voice, every recording, every file. You won't be starting a new life. You'll be chased by this one." Tears welled in her eyes, not out of regret, but rage, because she'd been outmaneuvered. "Then what do you want?" she hissed. "I want you to walk away, for good, quietly, permanently. You don't fight me in court. You don't ask for visitation. You don't speak Lila's name again. You disappear, not to some beachside villa, but into irrelevance. You vanish from our lives." She stared at me, and I knew she understood. I stood, walked toward the door. "You said once that I see everything like a mission," I said. "You were right, and this one, it's complete." She didn't get on the plane that night. She didn't leave the country. She didn't call again. A week later, her lawyer sent over a signed statement relinquishing all parental claims. No custody, no contact, no contest. It was over, and yet, for the first time since this began, I didn't feel triumph. I felt release. But one final loose thread remained, one that couldn't be left dangling. Luca Vargo. The name had surfaced in every major phase of the investigation, Whispers in Quinn's phone logs, encrypted transfers from Celine's accounts, private jet manifests to non-extradition countries. He was the architect behind the scheme that almost ended my life, and he was still free. Victor's intel traced him to the Amalfi Coast, low-profile, high-security compound, too remote for any agency to touch without political fallout. That's where Andres came in. We didn't need a raid, we needed noise. Andres orchestrated a digital leak, anonymous, targeted, and timed for maximum effect. In less than 24 hours, Vargo's assets were flagged by European regulators. Within 72, his compound was raided by Italian financial authorities. Nothing violent, just legal suffocation. By the end of the week, Luca Vargo was in custody awaiting extradition on tax evasion and wire fraud charges. Not for attempted murder, but it didn't matter. He was neutralized. Frank called me that night. "You finished it," he said. "No," I replied. "I freed it." The last scene in this story didn't take place in a courtroom or on a private jet. It happened in a classroom. Lila's school held a parent-student open house. Just a couple dozen kids, colorful crayon posters on the walls, folding chairs filled with tired adults pretending not to cry as their kids read poems about bravery. Lila's turn came. She stood at the front of the room, small but certain, and read a short essay titled, "My Favorite Person." She said, "My favorite person is my dad. He is strong, but also soft. He makes pancakes and protects me. He never lets the monsters win." My throat closed. Afterward, she ran to me and wrapped her arms around my waist. "Did you like it?" she asked. "I loved it," I whispered. And in that moment, everything, the betrayal, the near death, the courtroom, the surveillance, the recordings, the lies, it all melted away. She was the only truth I needed, the only victory that mattered, and I had won. There was a strange silence that came with the end, not the loud crash of victory, but the soft, measured quiet of everything falling into place. It had been 4 weeks since Celine signed away her rights. 4 weeks since Quinn was transferred from a holding facility in Nevada to a federal prison in upstate New York. 4 weeks since Luca Vargo's arrest made international headlines and set off a chain reaction that took down 3 other executives tied to his network. Everything I set out to do, I had done. And yet, for the first time in years, I didn't know what to do with myself. I was no longer fighting to survive, no longer hunting or defending or outmaneuvering. I had won, fully, unconditionally. And still, there was one last thing that felt unresolved. Me. One night, after I put Lila to bed, I sat alone in the study, staring at an old family photo. The 3 of us, me, Celine, Lila, smiling in front of a beach house in Santa Barbara. It was a lie. But back then, I didn't know it. I stared at that frozen moment in time, and for the first time since all of this began, I didn't feel anger. I felt sadness. Not for the betrayal, not for the manipulation, but for the man in that photo who thought he had it all figured out. I poured a glass of whiskey, turned off the lights, and let the silence sit with me. The next morning I got a letter. Not a text, not an email, a real letter, thick paper, handwritten, no return address. I opened it at the kitchen counter, coffee still brewing behind me. "Ethan, I don't know if you'll ever read this, or care to, but I wanted you to know that I'm leaving for good. Not just the city, not just the country, life as I knew it. I won't try to reach out again. I won't fight. I won't appear at your door or Lila's school or pretend I still belong. You beat me. And you should have. I thought I could outmaneuver you because I believed love made you weak. But you proved me wrong. You were the strongest person in the room because you didn't let hate devour you the way I did. I don't ask for forgiveness. I wouldn't believe I deserve it even if you gave it. But I hope, one day, Lila will know that I did one thing right in the end, letting her go. Goodbye, Celine. I read it once, then again, then I folded it and placed it in a drawer I never opened. It didn't change anything, but it mattered that she knew. 3 days later, I got a call from Victor. "Got something you'll want to hear," he said. He sent over an audio file intercepted from an encrypted channel tied to Quinn's former legal team. The voice on the file was Quinn's, tired, distorted by static, but unmistakably him. He played us. He set it all up. The studio, the charity accounts, the trip to Istanbul. It was all a setup. He's not just a husband with a grudge. He's a tactician. I listened again. Then I smiled. They finally understood what I had known all along. I never reacted. I planned. And I had been planning since the moment my father called me at that party and told me to get my daughter out of the house. With the trials coming up, I met with the federal prosecutor leading the Quinn case. A clean-cut woman named Amy Wallace. Harvard Law, Brooklyn-born, sharp as a scalpel. We sat in her office overlooking downtown LA, stacks of documents between us. "Your testimony won't be needed," she said. "Your evidence was airtight. Quinn's counsel is working on a plea." "Good," I said. "But," she added, "they're going to try and pin more on Vargo, build him up as the mastermind." "He was," I replied. "But Quinn wasn't innocent. He was more than complicit." She nodded. "You have nothing to worry about. The government won't forget who lit the match." "But off the record?" She leaned forward. "You ever think about consulting?" I laughed. "Not for the government." She smirked. "Private sector, then." I didn't answer. Not because I didn't know, but because I finally had options again. That night, I stood on the patio of my Beverly Hills home, overlooking the city lights. Lila was inside, baking cookies with her favorite babysitter. I held a glass of still water and let the cool air settle around me. I wasn't haunted anymore. I wasn't fighting ghosts. I wasn't proving anything. I was simply present. 2 weeks later, the trial began. Quinn pled guilty to 3 counts of fraud, 1 count of conspiracy, and 1 of corporate espionage. He was sentenced to 22 years in federal prison without parole. He didn't speak in court, didn't apologize, didn't even look in my direction. But I didn't need closure from him. He had already lost. Celine didn't show up. The courtroom was packed with reporters, investors, former clients, legal analysts. I kept my head down, my voice calm, my role clear. Not a victim. Not even a survivor. A strategist. One who never fired a bullet, but brought down an empire with precision. The day after the sentencing, Lila came home with a drawing. It was of the 2 of us, me holding her hand, both of us wearing superhero capes. She taped it to the fridge and wrote in big letters across the top, "Me and my dad, the team." I sat at the table for a long time after she went to bed, just staring at it. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't a return to normal. It was a transformation. I spent the next few months rebuilding, but not in the way people expected. I turned down interviews, refused book deals, walked away from every offer to make my story public. I didn't need attention. I needed peace. I moved my business headquarters out of LA to a quiet, high-security office in Santa Barbara. Smaller team, higher stakes, more selective clients, no flash, just focus. Blackwall Guardian became the name people whispered in elite circles, not for how loud we were, but for how precisely we worked. Quiet success, clean operations, tactical brilliance. It was everything Quinn had pretended to be. Frank and I stayed close, and he retired officially but kept a line open for anything unusual. Victor opened his own firm, with my blessing. We shared intel when it mattered, competed when it didn't. It was a good rivalry. But the real heart of it all was Lila. She started writing stories. Fiction. About a wolf who outsmarts hunters and saves a quiet forest. One day, she showed me a page and said, "I named the wolf Ethan." I didn't cry, but something in me shifted. One final letter came, 5 months after the trial. It wasn't from Celine. It was from Matthias Quinn. Handwritten, unsent, found in his confiscated belongings. "You were right, Ethan. I thought I could break you, but you were never just a husband. You were a weapon I didn't see coming. We play different games, you play long. If I could do it again, I would have run the moment you looked me in the eye." I burned it, not out of anger, but because it no longer mattered. His story ended. Mine was just beginning. A year later, it didn't feel like a war had ever happened. Not because I forgot, but because I had chosen not to let it define me. The house was quieter now, peaceful, not the sterile quiet from when Celine used to travel and I'd pretend we were still a family. This quiet was full, earned, alive. Lila was curled up on the couch, reading a book too big for her age. The dog, an energetic rescue mutt named Toby, lay snoring at her feet. I stood in the doorway just watching her, a coffee in one hand, the morning sun spilling across the floor. It had become a ritual. Wake early, make pancakes, watch her come alive slowly, like sunlight on the water. Every moment felt valuable now, not because of what I'd lost, but because of what I hadn't. They didn't take her from me. They didn't take me from her. That was my victory. People still asked about Celine, quietly, carefully. The media had moved on, of course, once the dust settled, once Quinn's sentence was handed down, once the final court documents were sealed. But neighbors, old friends, distant relatives, they always circled back. "Do you ever hear from her?" "No." "She really hasn't tried?" "No." "Do you think she regrets it?" "I don't know. And I don't need to." Celine disappeared like a ghost that finally understood its haunting had ended. She went where people like her always go, into the margins of someone else's memory. Occasionally, I'd hear she was spotted in Arizona or Barcelona or Dubai, always alone, always fading. Lila never asked for her, not once. She never cried for her either. I think that says more than anything. Blackwall Guardian had become a quiet powerhouse. We didn't advertise, we didn't pitch. We just solved high-stakes problems with precision. Word spread in the corridors that mattered. We were trusted because we never made noise. Victor opened his own firm and took some of the younger talent with him, but we stayed close. Frank retired for real this time, settling in Oregon with a woman who ran a lavender farm and didn't ask questions about his past. And me? I went from needing control to choosing peace. That was the biggest change. Not the money, not the success, but the silence inside me. That internal war of betrayal, loss, justice. It was over. There's this moment I remember. About 3 weeks after Quinn's sentencing, Lila came home with a science project. It was a diorama of the solar system, labeled planets made out of foam balls and glitter paint. I asked her what the tiny dot next to the sun was. "That's Mercury," she said. "It's small, but it moves fast." She paused, then added, "Like us, right? We're small, but we move fast." I didn't know what to say, so I just smiled. That night, I stared at her project after she went to bed, and I realized something. She had watched the whole thing, quietly, gently, and in her own way, she'd drawn her conclusion. We didn't have to be the biggest or the loudest. We just had to keep moving. One morning, I took her to the beach. Just us. A drive up the coast, past Malibu, to a quiet spot we used to visit when she was too small to remember. We sat on the sand. She buried her toes. I watched the waves crash and reform endlessly. "Are we safe now?" she asked. I looked at her and said the only thing I could. "Yes." "Forever?" I took a long breath. "As long as I'm here." She nodded like that was enough. And it was. Sometimes justice isn't about revenge. It's not about rage or punishment or making someone pay in blood. Sometimes justice is quieter. It's the right person holding their child's hand at the end of the war. It's the villain fading into silence with no stage left to stand on. It's the absence of fear. I used to think being a man meant being indestructible, unshaken. The provider, the protector, the wall. Now I think being a man is being present, being stable, being truthful when the people you love are watching. That's what Lila saw in me now. Not the suit, not the strategist, not the man who took down Quinn and Celine and their empire. She saw her dad, her constant, her peace. I never reopened the letters. Not Celine's, not Quinn's. They belonged to the past. But I kept one thing. A photo. Lila's drawing from the trial, taped to the fridge, fading from sun and time. Me and her, both in capes, smiling. No masks, no weapons, just us. And that's how the story ends. Not with noise, but with clarity, with love, and the calm that comes after the final storm. In life, the deepest betrayals rarely arrive with thunder. They slip in quietly, dressed as love, cloaked in trust. And when the world as we know it falls apart, we're left with only two choices: collapse beneath the weight, or rebuild with what remains. But sometimes, what remains is more powerful than what was lost. This story wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about power. It was about reclaiming dignity in the face of devastation, about what it means to lose everything and still choose clarity over chaos. In the aftermath of lies, manipulation, and near destruction, the greatest triumph wasn't survival. It was peace. True strength is found not in how loudly we fight, but in how quietly we rise. If this story has moved you, reminded you of your own strength, or simply made you pause, take a moment to share your thoughts. We read every comment, and your words keep this storytelling space alive. And if you haven't already, please subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next story that might change the way you see the world. Thank you for being here. Until next time, stay grounded, stay clear, and always choose truth.